As last time we had covered appraisal, about voyage planning we had covered appraisal, and we had covered part of passage planning. We had stopped at calculating underkeel clearance. So let's revisit underkeel clearance. How do you calculate? The first thing is draft observations. Calculations include hogging and sagging. That means how the ship is behaving. Is the midship draft more or midship draft less? Increase in the draft due to rolling and pitching because of weather. Effect of squat. Increase in draft due to density. Minimum charted depth and tidal height, and also the weather condition. These are the things you need to take into account when you are calculating the draft or the underkeel clearance. Tidal window. Tidal window is the time, suppose you are entering the area with a rising tide, then you are much safer, because as you are entering you will have more and more water under your keel. But if the critical point is if you are entering an area and the tide is falling, and then that can have an impact on your underkeel clearance. That's why it is always given to you a tidal window. That means beyond that you cannot go. Even at times the pilots will tell you, Captain, yes, the tide is rising, but if you don't come after a certain time, we will not be able to berth you. So that is the tidal window. And as it says, safe period, calculating tidal window must be clearly shown so that officer of the watch is in no doubt whether or not it is safe for the ship to proceed. So in any calculations in coastal navigation, this becomes very critical, especially in pilotage waters. And mostly the pilots will give you this information. Then is stream allowance. This is what they call the tidal stream. That in passage planning you need to account into it with regard to tidal stream. How is the tidal stream? Is it flooding? Is it ebbing? And this information in navigation chart is also reflected in shapes of diamonds. Example A, B, C, D, and it through referring to the tidal table you will know what is the condition of the tidal stream. The next is course alteration. Course alteration in a passage plan, a very critical activity that officer of the watch has to be sure that the ship has arrived at the position at which the course has to be altered. Before alteration of course, the officer of the watch has to be sure that there is no navigation hazard around the vessel. He has to recheck the position, and also he needs to mark a wheel over position. What is a wheel over position? It is a position at which the course alteration starts. So this has to be done very carefully. This will not be in the case of confined water when navigating with large scale charts, where margin of safety may be so close to require ship to commence altering at a wheel over position some distance before the track intersection in order to achieve the planned route. So as you see on this diagram, we have marked the wheel over position, and that is a position at which the course alteration will be starting. And this course alteration, wheel over position, will depend on how many degrees you want to alter, what is the size of your ship, etc. Okay, the next is parallel indexing. Very effective tool to ensure the vessel is within the safe area. So a parallel course is drawn of the chart, and a particular danger mark, you can mark it that you intend to keep 2 miles off this danger. So if at any time on your radar screen the vessel drifts towards this danger, you will immediately know through parallel indexing. This is a tool very effective, used by most pilots, masters, officers of the watch in coastal waters. We also call it PI, parallel indexing. So it is a technique which officer of the watch needs to learn and develop over time. So you can see on this diagram, they have done the parallel indexing. which is in the dotted line, which makes it clear how much distance off you want to keep away from a shallow patch or a navigation hazard. So this becomes a very effective tool for safe navigation. Then is ARPA mapping. Modern ARPAs have the facility to generate maps that can be stored. In some instances, such map may be stabilized through electronic navigation. Nowadays, because you have EGDIS, this may not be so important. Waypoints. The waypoints are the points shown on your chart. That means the various stages. If you see this chart, it is these points are the waypoints at which the course alteration happens. So in your passage plan, actually one has to calculate the waypoint, the position of that waypoint, and each waypoint will be in a sequential number so that you can keep a track of it. And the waypoint, you in the passage plan, you will have to calculate the speed or the ETA to the next waypoint and what is the speed, etc. So waypoint is nothing but the point at which the course alteration has to happen, but it's a very important aspect of the passage plan. Abort point or contingency. What is abort point? Abort point is a point at which a maneuver can be aborted or can be abandoned. That means if you are entering a, say, channel and you get the message on the VHF that the pilot boat is delayed, or you get a message that the tugboats are not ready, at that point you may decide to abandon your maneuver or your planned passage and turn back towards safe water. So during a passage plan, this has to be considered, because otherwise after crossing this point, it is very difficult for a vessel to turn back and be able to meet any contingency requirements. The contingency requirements could be in case of engine failure, tugs not available, pilot not available, delay in berthing, etc., because there is not enough sea room inside a, say, channel where the vessel is proceeding, and then it may run into danger. So one has to be very careful, and it should be marked clearly. The officer of the watch, the bridge team should be clear about this and what they need to do. When approaching, as it said in the slide, when approaching constrained water, the ship may come to a position beyond which it will not be possible to do other than proceed. Sometimes we also call it point of no return. That means after this point, you have to proceed come may what. Even if the tugs are there or not there, you will have to proceed. Excuse me. The term point of no return will be the position where the ship enters water so narrow there is no room to turn or retrack. So very simple, as I explained you. What are the circumstances? Deviation from approach line, machinery failure, equipment failure, maybe your radar has failed, maybe your engine has failed, tugs are not available, dangerous situation ashore or in the harbor, sudden change in the weather conditions, or any other circumstances which may make the situation unsafe. And that is a point at which a decision will have to be made. Of course, master will be very much involved in this when making the decision to ensure that a correct decision is made. Sorry. So as you can see on the chart, we have marked the abort point beyond which the vessel will not be able to retrack. Contingencies. Having passed the abort point and point of no return, the bridge team still needs to be aware that events may not proceed as planned and the ship may take an emergency action. And in an emergency action in confined waters, what you can do is anchor your ship and wait for the tugboats, etc., if some emergency happens. So this should be clearly marked on the passage plan, and this should be planned properly with the bridge team. So in a contingency planning, you will consider You will consider alternate route, safe anchorage, waiting areas or emergency. Whatever you have identified in your passage plan, it makes it easier when an emergency comes. Remember, no emergency comes with a warning. Emergencies come at a fraction of a second. We don't even know. But if we are prepared, if we have done our planning, we will be able to handle that emergency properly and effectively. Position fixing. You have to decide what tools you have for position fixing, what tools you will use in case of open waters. In mostly open waters, you will use GPS. If you are in closed waters, you will use radar fixes, and you can use GPS along with the radar. You can use bearing and distance from land, etc. So this has to be decided. What is your means of position? What is your frequency of position fixing? And with today ships fitted with EGDIS, actually the vessel position is live, because you can actually see the vessel position on the chart. Makes it easier for navigator. But keep in mind that GPS, the position displayed on the EGDIS is basis of GPS. And you also have to tell in your passage plan what is the frequency of position fixing. For example, every company will have their own requirement, but as a good practice, normally you do that in open waters, you will fix position every 1 hour. In closed water, you might do it 15 minutes or 20 minutes, depending on the circumstances. So this is what we call primary and secondary position fixing. You will have to decide which is your primary means, which is your secondary means. For example, visual bearing distance could be a secondary mean. Primary mean could be radar position, recons. Primary means could be maybe position of a buoy, a floating object, which you can take as a reference. But that may not, what I said was secondary means. Could be a buoy, could be a channel buoy, which could be a reference point but cannot be used as a primary means. Then in your passage planning, you need to identify which are the radar conspicuous. Can you stop for a minute? I'll just clear my nose. And visual navigation aid, which means that we need to identify which are those key objects on the coast which are easily identifiable on the radar screen. You need to mark them. You need to plan your position fixing according to that, and this will help to reduce your workload. Visual navigation aid could be transit bearings, could be lighthouse bearing, could be towers which are easily visible during day or night. And very often it can also happen that sometimes you are not able to identify certain key points. So it is easy, and it will make your life easier if you identify them earlier during your planning. Landfall lights, that means what is the maximum visibility the light will see, you will see, and there is a concept called the raising distance and the dipping distance. When was the light last seen, or when was the light first seen? Depending on the height of eye, that means at what height is your draft, or what is the height at which you are observing the light, you can actually calculate this. Radar targets, as I mentioned earlier, look for reliable targets. Sandy coast is not a good target. Look for rocky, solid points which can help you identify in position fixing. Rock awash may be more, he says steep islet is going to be more reliable than a rock awash. So these are things which you need to know, and as an officer of the watch, based on your experience, you will be able to optimize the usage of radar by picking up targets which are more reliable. Then the Voyage system. With the Voyage system, we can use Voyage system as a reference. Excuse me. But you cannot rely on the buoy system or the channel, because sometimes the buoys may be moving out of their positions. So, that becomes critical. As it's a situation where buoy fixing is critical, such position can be predetermined by planning the stage, by noting their range and bearing from known fixed objects. Yes, you can verify the buoy's position by knowing another reference point, or plotting your ship's position and then verifying whether the buoy is in position or not. And even the local traffic control system will be able to help you. Fixed frequency, I mentioned earlier, it depends on company's procedure. Some companies say 1 hour, some says 2 hours in open sea. In close water, it should be maybe 20 minutes or 15 minutes. As a guideline, the fixing should be at a time period such that it is not possible for a ship to get into danger between the two fixes. Say example, you took the last position at 11 o'clock and you are taking the next position at 11:30. So between 11 and 11:30, the ship should be safe, and that is the criteria or reference point. Any additional information for the safety which officer think is required should be included in passage planning, which could be reporting point, anchor clearance, pilot boarding area, tug engagement, traffic area, transit area, compass error, leading lights or clearing marks. So these are the leading lights, which not only helps in safety of navigation, but also if you want to check your compass error, it's a good reference point. Clearing bearings. Then is your luminous range, is the maximum distance at which light can be seen, dependent on the intensity of light. And this, from the list of light, there is a luminous table available. You can use it and can calculate the range of light you will be able to see. Nominal range, which is beside the light, is usually what is mentioned. And as I mentioned, this is the range of light you can use as a reference, and depending on the height of eye, then you can calculate the maximum distance. Other information: landfall, extreme range, echo sounder. Try not to have chart overcrowding. Planning book. Every navigating officer tends to maintain a notebook for all the records with regard to passage planning, etc., or navigation. Under pilotage conditions, it's the same, but remember, pilot becomes a part of the bridge team. He is there, but the responsibility is still of the ship's master. The only area where the pilot actually becomes responsible for the ship is in Panama Canal. Excuse me. The other areas, as we should say, it is always the pilot's conduct and master's command. That means courses and speed, whatever are being done or ordered are in approval with the master's agreement. So pilotage should be completed, passage plan should be completed prior to start of the voyage. And as you said, berth to berth is the passage plan. Is it okay here? Right. So berth to berth, pilot must be flexible, plan must be flexible and be amended by the master at any time in the interest of the safety and efficiency. The master and officer must never remain committed to pre-planned course of action in prevailing circumstances, render a departure from plan necessary for the safety of the ship. So this is a plan. You should be ready to change if the circumstances require you to change. What factors? Meteorological condition, obstacles, which channels to be monitored for pilots, areas where pilot indexing can be used, you should use in pilotage waters, pilot boarding areas for pre-planning, contingency planning, and note where tugs are normally met and check where tucks can easily be in an emergency. Passage plan has to be approved by the master. This goes without saying. Therefore, it's the master who is the final authority on the passage plan, and this should be, the evidence should be available on the bridge that the master has signed off the passage plan. The third stage is execution. That means actually executing the plan, actually going ahead and doing what you have planned. So, executing the close continuous monitoring of the ship's progress along with pre-planned track is essential for the safe conduct of the passage. Restricted waters may more frequent track monitoring is required. Where possible, continuous track monitoring can be carried out with the use of radar or parallel indexing. Any deviation from the intended course can be easily identified and corrective actions taken. Where radar has the facility of chart overlay or grid line, these must be used to monitor the progress of the voyage. So this is the tool available which you can use for execution, especially the radar, ARPA, EGDIS. Navigation equipment which is fitted for the position monitoring, bearing in mind the following: visual bearing combined with radar are usually the best and accurate means. Position obtained by nav aid should be checked where practical by visual means. Value of the echo sounder as a navigation aid, yes, especially in confined waters, but not in very congested or say near the terminal or in the channel. Sometimes it may not be able to give you accurate depth. Buoys, as I mentioned, should not be used for position fixing. These circumstances, their position should be checked before you use. An informed decision in advance to a frequency to which the position is to be fixed should be made for each section of the voyage. Plan having been made, discussed and approved, execution of the plan is now determined by this meant that method used to carry out plan according to the best available resources. The final details will need to be confirmed with the actual timing of the passage plan. So what it means is, once the passage planning is done, appraisal is done, now once it is approved, then you should start plotting the plan or start executing the plan. And although you cannot proceed with this plan until the vessel has sailed or has completed the cargo and is scheduled for the pilot to receive the pilot. So number one, ETA for the tide is important. ETA daylight, because certain areas you may prefer to cross them during daylights, especially in where there is high risk or strong currents. Sometimes the masters prefer to approach in daylight. Traffic conditions, that means what is the traffic? Is there any vessel deep draft traffic or a crossing traffic, fishing traffic? Then is the destination ETA which will change. That's why when you send your message for ETA, you normally will write WP, weather permitting. Tidal stream information you obtain from tidal atlases, which should be now reflected. Courses to be steered, calculating in mind that there is tidal stream and adjust your courses accordingly. Tactics also to need plan modification if required. If you find something, if equipment is not working or position is unreliable, you may modify your plan. Additional personnel may be called. It could be during restricted visibility, heavy weather, pilotage, etc. You may need extra people. In my own experience, passing Singapore Strait, I would keep one additional watchkeeper on the bridge. One of them would only be plotting positions, while other one was monitoring or helping me with the traffic management. So this is a briefing. I think this is that prior to starting the voyage, there should be a briefing or a meeting of the bridge team, and chief engineer should also be included in this meeting, and any questions, anything to be raised can be discussed or sorted. Please remember, fatigue is a huge issue. Many accidents at sea have happened because of fatigue, so one needs to be careful about fatigue, or should ensure that all watchkeepers are well rested in compliance with MLC requirement or STCW chapter 8. This is passage preparation. Okay, bridge preparation. That means the equipment on the bridge to be checked before arrival or before departure. Should ensure that all equipment is working and in good order. Check the chart table equipment is in good order. Check that ancillary watchkeeping equipment is okay, like LDS lamp, azimuth, etc. Checking and monitoring and recording, example, course recorder, engine movement book, etc. should be available. Confirming that gyro is fully operational and the error is correct. It's not showing something which is abnormal. Checking the instrument illumination of, like sometimes you'll see that the tachometer light is not working or the rudder angle light is not working. Make sure these are all okay. Check that the navigation lights and signals are in good order. Sometimes you want to raise a black ball or a cylinder and you suddenly realize it's not available. Switching on navigation electronic equipment has been shut down and operating mode and position confirmed. Switching on and confirming readout of echo sounder and logs. Ensuring that scanners are clear. That means the radar is, when it's moving, there is nobody on the radar mast. Switching on the telegraph. So basically this is something like, you can say, pre-arrival or pre-departure checklist covering all aspects. GMDSS equipment becomes important. You have to do your self-test, external test every 3 months. Ship's whistle has to be tested, but remember, exercise caution, only a short blast. Clear view screens, yes, very important component of the bridge in case of bad weather or rain. So we need to make sure that the bridge clear view screens are operational. Confirming that the clocks are synchronized. Workplaces in all lighting, etc. Air conditioning is working. In my opinion, if your bridge air conditioning is not working, it becomes very difficult for the watchkeeper to perform. Ensure that navtags, etc. have been tuned and is in good order. So that's all from the execution point. The next topic is on progress. That means, how are you seeing how the plan is as per of the passage plan? That is, monitoring is what? Ensuring that the ship is following the plan as you have already laid down, and the officer of the watch is assisted by other personnel or acting as a backup and information source to other officer having the con. What is the con? Con is who is conducting the ship, who is in charge of the watch. Now, this is what in monitoring you will do. This is a suggestion from one company, that open sea condition, you can check vessel position through GPS every 2 hours. In coastal water, maybe 20 minutes or 30 minutes. You can use visual bearing or radar or electronic aid, parallel indexing. In restricted waters, you may use every 20 minutes. Or every 6 minutes also they recommend, but 6 minutes in my opinion sometimes can be practical issue because you may not have enough time. So as we already mentioned, that position fixing has to be done regularly. Visual bearings have to be taken by using azimuth visually, or if that is not possible, then you use EBL from the radar, and this has to be done on regular intervals. That means 6 o'clock, 6:15, 6:30, 6:45, so on and so forth. If your actual position is not available, then you mark a DR position or estimated position. Providing the ship is fixed, carried out on regular intervals, and can be picked off as a distance between the present and the previous fix. So sometimes, if suppose the GPS is not available, or maybe you don't have any landfall, then you may use your estimated position to verify for navigation purposes. Soundings. Why do you need soundings? Because you want to, it's another way to check position. Because whatever is the charted depth on the chart, if suddenly you find the depth what you are recording is different, then you need to be alarmed and have to take some action. Otherwise, echo sounder is a good way to ensure that your ship is on the track. Cross track error, that means once if you have plotted a ship's position, how off track it is from your pre-planned route, and that is called the cross track error. As it says, having fixed ship's position will be aware whether or not the ship is following the planned track and whether or not the ship will arrive at the next waypoint at that. So you actually can see that if the vessel is on the right or left of the track. If ship is deviating, then you need to adjust the course. Very, very important during your passage is in compliance with the collision regulations to prevent any accidents at sea. At all times, the officer of the watch should comply with the prevention of collision regulations, should have good understanding of these regulations, should be absolutely clear what is his action in case of a stand-on or a give-way vessel, what do the rules say in case of restricted visibility, what is his duty if the other vessel is not taking action, what is his duty if overtaking another vessel, etc., etc. So call regs forms a very, very important component of safe watch keeping, and officer of the watch should at all times be very clear on what the collision regulations ask us to do. Then there could be non-navigation emergencies while you are at sea that could deviate your attention from the navigation, and this could be hazardous situations such as accidentally entering an area of high danger. Having planned, you should have allowed such contingency, but the best plan cannot allow for each and every situation. Situational awareness in these cases can be very important. Managing your time is very important to ensure that the officer of the watch exactly knows what time is the alteration coming up, what time he has to give 1 hour notice to the engine room, what time he has to call the pilot station, what time he has to report to the vessel traffic control. So this is a part of your duty as an officer to know, and what are the different stages of the voyage, what you need to do. Lookout, part of call regs, every ship has to maintain a lookout. Many times during the day, open sea conditions, the officer of the watch may be the lone lookout, but most of the companies in their procedure have mentioned that sunset to sunrise is officer of the watch plus a lookout. Now remember, under the new STCW, a lookout is also called assistant watchkeeper, and he has to be certified. So you need to take that into account. And if there is restricted visibility and you have a vessel on hand steering, then the helmsman is not a lookout. You need to have a separate person who will act as a lookout. So what does the lookout do? Continuous watch to see if other ships or navigation dangers, visual observation of any environmental changes, maybe wind, visibility, observing also the magnetic and gyro compass if a vessel is approaching, and quickly be able to tell the officer of the watch if there is any danger. Looking at the lighthouses or light, the officer of the watch should be able to recognize them. Lookout duty shall also include monitoring and control of ship alarm system, because on the bridge there are many alarms. So if the alarm comes, you should know exactly what this alarm is about. He should also be aware of the electronic aids, excuse me, and it should not be ignored, such as radar, ARPA, etc. VHF, yes, you should use, but should use judiciously so that it cannot be misused or there is no confusion. A routine should be established for major alteration of courses, including checking astern, checking both visually and by radar along the bearing track if there are other ships, because if you have altered to starboard and a ship is overtaking, that can result into a collision. Under keel clearance, which is already calculated, your job is to monitor and maintain that UKC. Waypoints, we have already mentioned that the waypoints are the points at which you will be altering, so you should ensure that you are maintaining those waypoints as per the plan. Transit ranges, that means the ranges which will confirm that the ship is on track, or even help you to verify the compass error. These are the transit ranges, and these are mainly in coastal waters or confined waters. Leading lights, it's very similar to transit lights, if to help you in the safe navigation. Clearing marks, that means at a certain bearing, if the light turns green or red, it indicates that you are clear of the danger. Rising and dipping distances, which we already mentioned, is the maximum distance, or the first time when you see the light and the last time when you see the light, and this will depend on the height of your ship, height of eye. Light sector, changing colors of sector light can also be used for advantage of OOW. In certain circumstances, it should be aware that will indicate that the ship is standing into danger. On occasion, the flickering sector change can virtually be used as a bearing. Care needs to be taken in icy weather or as sectors can become indistinct. So, depending on what light you see, you will be able to understand whether you are safe waters or in danger waters. GPS and navigation equipment or electronic navigation equipment forms the core part of navigation today. Therefore, these should be handled properly. There will be times when there will be a loss of GPS signal. Officer of the watch should be able to identify that. There will be time when the GPS may report an error. As an officer of the watch, he should be competent enough to understand and use of various electronic equipment and the alarms and their shortcomings. So this is what MCA notice 379 says, that with regard to GPS and electronic equipment, these are only aid to navigation. They only help you in navigation. The final decision is yours. You should be aware of various factors which can affect position fixing accuracy. Appreciate the need to cross-check position information using other methods. Recognize the importance of navigation aid and knowledge of limitation. Be aware of over-reliance on the output from this. Sometimes we tend to over-rely on the navigation aid, so we should be careful about that. We should avoid. If today many of the ships are fitted with EGDIS, so your position fixing through EGDIS should be maintained, and you should ensure that correct usage of EGDIS is made so that the vessel is not into any kind of danger. EGDIS, there is a risk of losing high level of situational awareness. because navigator has a very passive role, because most of the job is done by the ACDIS. But if your settings are not correct, there can be a possibility that the vessel may run into danger. So make sure that does not happen. There should be enough safety margins. This is not sufficient. Whether ensure that safety of the vessel to confirm integrity of the automated position fixing or maintaining awareness. ACDIS alarm, this is again one of the things we find in many cases, that the settings of ACDIS like safety contours etc. are not done properly and accidents have happened. So this should be always considered, that what is a safety contour and how the settings are done. Some companies have suggested that the dynamic draft plus 50% of the static draft in open sea is your safety contour. It may therefore be permissible for a vessel to cross this contour during the transit. So this setting, safety contour, is very important. Then is your shallow contour, which area between 0 meter contour and shallow contour is colored, allowing the gradient of seabed to be graphically displayed. Now, people who are ACDIS used or who have been trained under the ACDIS are familiar with this, but accident reveal that many of the cases the groundings have taken place because the settings of the ACDIS equipment was improper. Then is your alarms, cross-track alarms, other alarms which should be fitted, and officer of the watch should be aware of these alarms. Anti-grounding alarms, which are, there is a guard zone, guard vector. The officer of the watch should be aware of these alarms. Then the alert comes when you are approaching a waypoint. So a navigator must remember that when vessel will follow the radius of turn and not necessarily go through the geographical waypoint. This is particularly relevant if the autopilot is integrated with ACDIS and operating in a track control mode. Then is your off course. If there is a off course alarm, you will get an alarm. Then the ACDIS also gives you special areas. There are areas where there is emission control, and if there is where you need to change to low sulfur etc. So the officer of the watch will get a warning that he should have marked this during his planning stage, and a alarm will trigger that the vessel is about to enter these areas. Safety depth, we have already mentioned that these settings have to be considered. The scale of the chart, SCAMIN is one of the functions. You can use maximum, look ahead functions which help you to know where you are, what are the dangers ahead of you. Radar overlay, this is a function that means whatever are happening on your radar screen can be reflected onto the ACDIS, and this is what is a function in the ACDIS or can be used. Parallel indexing can be used for monitoring the ship's progress. Position fixing, as we have already said, you can use GPS, and if there is land and distance or land bearing or lighthouse, you can use that for using EBL and variable range marker. ACDIS also gives you a track history, and that in fact helps you to know how your vessel has been navigating or was she setting. If the facility can also be used to check, ensure if gyro heading and log speed were confirmed, the actual course made good by the GPS. Then comes the equipment. What you need to check is you need to regularly check the equipment on the bridge, the autopilot, the radars, the light signal, the alarms, the whistles. They have to be tested time to time and log entries to be made so that you ensure that all the equipment has been tested. Many times it has happened that when the time has come to use or test the equipment, the whistle is not working, maybe there is no air or there is some problem. So it is good to test this equipment before we put them to use. Again, 3 good principles: good planning, ship must not be put to risk by one-man error, ship should not be put to risk due to equipment failure, and number 4, ship's position must at all times be correctly related to land. Passage plan under pilotage, these are IMO resolution which says, despite the duties and obligation of a pilot, his presence on board does not relieve the officer of the watch from his duties and obligations. He should cooperate closely with the pilot and maintain an accurate check on vessel's position. That means a officer of the watch and the pilot are both part of bridge team and each must complement the other, but the responsibility is of the officer of the watch and the final responsibility is of the master. Many times it has happened that when the pilot is on board, people tend to relax and take it easy, which should be avoided. Okay, the last topic is the log entries and the record keeping. So the learning objective is, upon completion of this topic, we'll have understanding why it is necessary to maintain records. Why we keep records? Because there are three related reasons for keeping record. One is human memory. Everybody has a long-term memory for remembering things which we have learned, and a short-term memory which enables limited items of information, like a bearing, and then it's forgotten. Purpose of logbook: they are provided to keep accurate record of events, that tomorrow an inquiry happens or an accident happens, you want to check what was the reason why this happened. Therefore the record actually becomes a very essential part of watch keeping. Today, of course, we have Voyage data recorder like black box on a plane, but still logbook entries, logbook records, chronometer records, master orders, master standing order, all the records becomes very, very essential part of the evidence in case of any casualty. Ship record must be studied after an incident. The flag state may ask for this record, the coastal state may ask for this record. So you need to maintain these records accurately and correctly. This example I have put here, a record keeping is well-run ship is in defense against unfounded. In a recent case, a ship docked in North Korean port, and the first people on board were officials who took master ashore and put him in prison, claiming that ship had run down a fishing vessel. Fortunately, the update log and explicit chart work proved beyond doubt that the ship was at least 11 miles away from fishing vessel at the time of collision, and therefore the master and the ship were released. People should not falsify record, because that is a criminal offense and it will put your company, your master, to a disadvantage. Ship's log should be consulted whenever there are claims from charter, especially speed claims or maybe weather related claims or claims for cargo in which the weather during the voyage could play an important role. Practical tips: most logbook entries are time dependent. When there is time sensible to write the logbook during the watch as event take place, it is always easier to do these tasks little and often. When officer of the watch is very busy, writing up the logbook could be a distraction. In this case, keep a small notebook, make your records, and you can record everything later on. Entries made for others to read. If you make a mistake, you can cross out and then write instead of using a whiteout or something. What should be entered in the logbook? There are number of points which we must consider, ranging from course you steered, the speed, the weather, the course alteration point, compass error, speed, your equipment condition, who is on the watch, what time the handover of the watch took place, who is at the con, so on and so forth. So there are various entries which are required, and these days the logbooks, the ship owners have made very detailed one so that all these entries could be included. What should be entered in the logbook? I have mentioned already: mooring status, use of anchorage. Other records, as mentioned, is like movement logbooks. It could be your compass error books, etc. Some ships may have other records, such as you need to record for the temperature and humidity, or what time the steam was open for the oil tanks, etc. In summary, In critical situation, note that a priority is in notebook to be entered in the logbook at the end of the voyage. Write neatly, do not rub or erase. Ensure all logs and data loggers have paper and ink. Keep compass error book updated. Postpone journal record keeping until critical situation is relieved. Okay, with that we will close this, and we have completed the passage planning discussion and also with regard to record keeping. Thank you so much.